Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners. It happens to be Wednesday, April 24th. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll start out this morning with citizen input. Carl Shoemaker, thank you for joining us.
Morning, I'm Carl Shoemaker. I live in Bend. Children need to be protected from physical abuse by anyone, including abusive relatives, no matter what relation they are, as well as emotional abuse. Hillary Clinton was right. The entire community is responsible for how a child turns out, and so the entire community is responsible for how a child is treated as they grow up. Indifference is the most lousy thing of all. An indifferent Christian is as bad as an indifferent atheist. Elie Wiesel said, "We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Vote or lose." Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker, for those words. It is Child Prevention of Child Abuse Month in April. So thank you for those words. Is there anyone else in the room that wanted to say something? You do need to fill out a blue form. Stephen, do we have anyone on Zoom? No one this morning. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead then on to our consent agenda.
Move approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we'll go to item number 4 then, the Public Safety Campus Plan. Yes, Lee, good morning. Thank you.
Just two other notes, just real quick, just kind of different topics. So Administrative Support Specialist Day. I want to thank Brenda. Angie's on vacation right now. Good for her. And Megan really supporting us and making sure that we're prepared for these meetings. So thank you very much for your efforts. And then also today's a big day for prescribed burns. Up Paulina right now, there's just a big blanket of smoke coming down, but it's really exciting to know that we're able to do these prescribed burns in the spring and reduce fuels and wildfire threats. So there's two topics. Get out in the morning here.
That's what I thought when I drove through all the smoke this morning.
There's smoke out there.
For
Okay.
anyone who's concerned about the smoke, the Public Health Department has put out a whole bunch of educational information on how to mitigate the impacts of that smoke, prescribed fire smoke, on your health.
Wonderful. Lee.
Good morning, Commissioners. We're pleased to be here today, and we'll start with introductions. I'm Lee Randall, Facilities Director.
I'm Emily Freed. I'm Project Manager with Mark.
I'm Eric Nielsen, Capital Improvement Manager.
And just to check, we should have Greg Cook with KMB Architects joining us online.
He is online. If you want him.
Sure, as a presenter.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are pleased to be here today to present the culmination of nearly 2 years of collaboration between our project team, county departments and offices, and our partner agencies on the public safety campus. I'd like to acknowledge, first I'd like to thank Henry Alaman with OTEC CPM, our owner's representatives, Emily Freed and Victoria Tronca with Pinnacle Architecture, and Greg Cook and Sherry O'Brien with KMB Architects. As illustrated on this slide, a broad contingent of steering committee members and individual stakeholders working on the campus devoted their time and energy to this project. They were instrumental in providing background information and insight into their daily operations and best practices in their fields. The steering committee met regularly to review progress and provide input and feedback. Established 30 years ago, the public safety campus is comprised of almost 28 acres and is utilized by 6 primary stakeholders: Deschutes 911, Community Justice, the Sheriff's Office, Health Services, and Oregon State Police. Veterans Village is also located on the campus. As part of this process, input was included from the City of Bend, ODOT, and Swally Irrigation District. Beginning in 1994 with the construction of the adult jail, the campus has been built out over the years to support a variety of public safety functions. It represents millions of dollars of community investment in purpose-built facilities that would be very difficult to site in alternate locations in the future. In 2018, as space became constrained on the campus, a planning process was undertaken to ensure that the establishment of the Stabilization Center did not impede future growth of existing core services. That program has been a resounding success, and the establishment of the 2018 plan set the stage for a comprehensive approach to the campus. With the passage of 5 years and the completion of 5 significant projects, needs that were identified as midterm in 2018 are now near term, and this update of the plan now brings those to the forefront. The plan itself is a 52-page document that seeks to provide a roadmap to the future and a vision for future development of infrastructure to support the vital services provided to our community by departments, offices, and partner agencies on the campus. The plan is a living document that's intended to be revisited, consulted, and revised regularly to adapt as our community changes and continue to celebrate and prioritize the core services and values established in the plan by stakeholders, steering committee members, and the Board of County Commissioners. Our aim today is to provide a summary and overview of this draft plan for the board's review and consideration. And our intention is to return to the board in the very near future for final approval and adoption. At this point, we will continue. We have about 10 additional slides, and the team will provide an overview of the plan, and then we'll all be available for any questions that you may have or any questions that come up along the way. Thank you.
One of the most critical components of this campus planning effort was establishing a shared vision. We have a steering committee that is comprised of nearly 24 first responder and law
I want to grab a microphone just in case somebody online isn't hearing it real well.
law enforcement agencies, as well as behavioral health, community justice, maintenance, and facility directors. The services they provide on the campus contribute to the overall safety of our community. The stakeholders really extend beyond those providing and receiving services on campus. They include everyone within the community. At the very beginning of the project, we had the steering committee share their hopes and fears, their overall vision for the project. So up on screen, we have all of the common words that we received reflecting their hopes for the project. You can see we have equity, community, welcoming, people-centered, life-affirming, and so forth. Deschutes County also has goals and objectives for all the services provided across the county. It was pretty evident early on that the steering committee members not only strive to achieve these goals and objectives and the services they provide, but they also hold these goals and objectives for the long-term vision of the campus. So these goals include safe communities, healthy people, service delivery, resilient county, housing, and stability. So the team took the steering committee's hopes and fears, as well as Deschutes County's goals and objectives, to develop what we call the guiding principles for this campus planning effort. Those include unified campus design, collaboration and relationships, equity, innovation, safety, strategic planning, and wellness. These guiding principles are seen as critical to the shared mission of the project. That mission is to use the provision of the core services provided on campus as a driver for all decisions and prioritizations. So throughout the entire course of the project, from identifying the near to long-term needs, prioritizing those needs, and developing a campus plan, we constantly reflected on these guiding principles and the mission. to make those decisions and prioritizations. Delivery of core services is really important. The campus is confined on space. There's residential developments. We have the highway and some commercial properties adjacent. There's no room for growth. And as the community continues to grow, we need to plan long-term for the growth of those core services on campus. So the design team spent quite a bit of time with the steering committee to assess the core services that are currently provided on campus, and then those that should be provided long-term. We looked at basically unfeasible expenses tied to relocating facilities and operations, as well as critical adjacencies. So as we developed those plans, we identified the services that are critical to the community, but are not critical to remain on the campus. So those will be reflected in the plans that we review.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the long-term vision, it represents a 20-year look ahead for the campus. So we are focused on the core services that Emily just described. And I think it's important to recognize that we're not just expanding those services, but we want to create some better connections between those services. So we're reimagining the access to and within the site. So we want to provide better separation between secure and public functions. We want to provide better pedestrian access through the interior of the campus, which we know is supportive of those principles we identified of a unified campus design, of collaboration between the different entities on the campus, and also wellness for staff and for the public that visit the campus. If you go to the next slide, please. So in the near term, our work is focused on expansion and renovation projects for the sheriff's office. So that's Station 9, which is the jail, and Station 10, which is the administrative building for the sheriff's office. And those high priority near-term needs for the sheriff's office were identified as expanded visiting capabilities within the jail, expanded and improved evidence storage in the administrative building, and expanded service area for concealed handgun licensing. So what you see represented on the plan is actually a 2-story expansion. It will have some additional administrative space for the sheriff's office on level 2. And I think really importantly, it's going to improve wayfinding and access for people who are visiting either the jail lobby or the sheriff's office lobby. Go to the next slide, please. So in the midterm, so this is 5 to 10 years out, we are looking at relocating some of the services that are currently on site that weren't deemed as the core services or the core functions for the campus. And those include the vehicle maintenance areas, which is several garages and a lot of parking, and also search and rescue. So that allows us to move the sheriff's office maintenance and the SWAT functions into those spaces, and it clears out the southern part of the center of the campus for an expansion of the jail. And that expansion is going to include new mental health housing, new orientation housing, and a new intake area with a sally port. The other work envisioned would also include an expansion and renovation of the stabilization center. So that includes more secure parking for staff, a renovated public lobby for the juvenile justice center that is more welcoming and better functioning. And on the south side of the campus, it would also include some additional secure storage and secure parking for Deschutes County 911 and Oregon State Police. Go to the next slide, please. And our long-term work, so this is out to that 20-year horizon, builds on those previous efforts and seeks to fulfill that goal of a unified campus. So you can see that the center of the campus is fully opened up as a pedestrian connection. So that's for staff, but also for the public. And we accomplish that by relocating some Deschutes County facilities maintenance space out of the center of the campus and into a new space near the Veterans Village. This is where we also take the work center housing that's in the parole and probation building, and we relocate that to an expansion of the main jail. And that allows additional training and wellness functions to take over that space in parole and probation. And in this long-term phase, we would see Deschutes County 911 and Oregon State Police expand the building that they're currently in. I think the next slide is just thank you. So I'll pass it back to you, Emily and Lee.
Okay, so that's the overview that we wanted to provide this morning. As I mentioned, the accompanying document, which is the actual plan we provided in the agenda packet for the public as well as the Board of Commissioners. And at this point, the team's available to answer any questions and or provide any additional information.
Oh, Lee, I noticed in the 10 to 20-year plan, you've got Oregon State Storage, where Ryan Rednick had actually figured out we could put the parole and probation trailers there for the program that we voted down over on Wilson, because that isn't right next to neighborhoods. So I know that hasn't been brought to us yet, but I just think that's something that we should consider, because it is not by a neighborhood. And it's relatively flat land. And, I think it would be easier to put something in there and it's close to parole and probation, and it's not far from a bus stop. So anyhow, I'd heard that the state police wanted to use it for storage, but surely they could do storage somewhere else.
Well, that's something that, as we've looked at this plan going back to 2018, one of the important items early on was looking at adjacencies and looking at long-term needs. As I mentioned when we started, as growth has happened, we're essentially running out of room on the campus. And so part of the mission of the steering committee and the stakeholders were to identify core services and then look at how those adjacencies related to core services. So as we've looked at OSP and 911 going back even to 2018, there are needs that they both have currently that if funding were available, likely we would be seeking solutions for those needs related to storage for 911, related to the antenna projects and the ongoing radio projects. They're currently out of space, that the area that's currently allocated for space is full for storage and for the radio teams. And so that's how those uses were elevated in the plan, and how they were identified. That space was identified both because of core services and then as well as because of the adjacencies, so that as those entities, they all work out of those offices that are next door, and being able to access shop space nearby was something that came out of that planning process. The second thing I would say is that as we began looking at the campus as a whole, based on our reading and understanding of City of Bend Planning Code and our conversations with the city, our working assumption has always been that any development on that corner of the campus would require the extension of Service Road. And so, as you all know, Service Road dead ends on the north side of that parcel, dead ends on the south side, and there's a fairly significant hill in between. So that is likely why that space hasn't been developed and utilized to this point, because of the costs involved, not only in putting in city required infrastructure, curb, gutter, street, all of the utilities, but then also to develop that space. At a minimum, likely we would need to, if that parcel were broken off and as a separate parcel, that frontage would need to be developed. But as we currently understand the code, the entire street would need to be extended, which is how we've approached the development of that space. So we've looked at that proposed use, and that's something for the board to consider. And we're welcome if or we're happy to provide additional research and information on that particular location and use. But there are some challenges, namely development of the parcel, the types of buildings that might be able to be built there. And then as it relates to the plan and the rest of the core services on campus, making sure that the board has an opportunity to review how that use would fit with other existing uses. But if directed, we could provide a deeper dive into that proposal.
Well, the fact that we have currently 24 level 3 sex offenders in Deschutes County, it could be really a better location for those, if some of those people need to be placed, that they would be placed there, not by a neighborhood. That's just one of the things I think we have to consider, since we've learned so much about the state parole and probation system now. And it's definitely a significant number.
Lee, do you have a sense of what that access road might cost to build?
We've worked on some very high level numbers. The infrastructure itself, based on very, very preliminary, just conceptual review, just the contracting, not including, excavation, we think would be somewhere in the $500,000 to $1 million. That's just for curb gutter paving utilities. The excavation, we would estimate, may be another $2 million in addition to that. And so that's been one of the reasons, that's kind of been the last corner that we've sort of reserved as the last space to develop as we look at other needs across the campus, partly due to those projected infrastructure costs.
But it is possible to access that property. You come around the other way on Service Road, and it's right there at the end of the Service Road. So I don't know if the city would say, oh, no, you got to put the whole road in now in order to use that bit of the property. I'm sure it would take a lot, but it is clearly accessible at this moment in time because of Service Road.
Yeah, based on our reading of code, our conversations with consultants regularly in the city, that would be much like a development of that remaining tax lot, which typically triggers the frontage improvements.
Do you have a recovery center on here? Our copy is quite teeny. Is there a recovery center planned in here at some point in time too?
An additional recovery center.
Right. In addition to the stabilization center, it seemed like there was a recovery center over here.
It's not part of the expansion plans of the current plan. There is the existing Deschutes County Recovery Center, the SRTF, that is currently located on the plan. And as we identified based on core services, as we identified future options, we did not, the team and steering committee did not identify an additional location for an SRTF. We have been, property management and facilities have been working with health services on identifying some opportunities around the county for other locations for an SRTF. An SRTF is something that—
Yeah, please identify what an SRTF is.
Okay, a secure residential treatment facility.
And they're limited to 16 beds. And I'm actually going to talk to Senator Merkley about that on Sunday morning, because that limit, that it could be a lot more helpful if it wasn't 16. That the mental health limiting factor has been in since 1963. And I think maybe it's time that we increase it.
And secure residential treatment facilities are one of those services that can be located elsewhere. There's not a required adjacency to the other agencies, departments, and offices on campus. And so that's one of those current functions that was identified that could likely be located somewhere else as the county expands those services.
Well, I really appreciate that, because we've talked about this about every 6 months for the last couple of years, and this is really distilled down to, phase 1, 2, 3. So I really appreciate that big picture. I know that we're going to be basically shoehorning in some stuff on the existing land available. It becomes a pretty high volume, high throughput, many active activities campus, but it really is starting to hang together very well. So I appreciate that. One question, search and rescue, they've got vehicles and, the excitement of being responders for volunteers. What's the vision there?
So I'll provide a quick response and then I'll turn it over to Greg for a little more detail. But you make a good point. When a mission goes out, there could be 40 to 60 private vehicles coming in, and then those folks gearing up and heading out. And so that's a pretty large activity. And currently they access from Brita to the existing facility. That is, in talking with the sheriff's office and other partners, that's one operation that has been identified that could easily be located off campus, but preferably nearby. There's an important adjacency between search and rescue and vehicle maintenance because of their how closely they work together. So any plan that we would put forward would likely show them locating together to another location. That also frees up, as you look into some of the details of the plan, that then frees up that space, one, to reallocate public and secure access. And so one positive outcome of that is it would actually reduce the number of trips, in our view, up Brita. And so, we have the residential areas on the north end and south end along Brita, and then also on the west side. And so one of the good benefits of separating the public access and creating that new access on the east side for public services and keeping secure access for the jail in particular on the west side is, in our view, would likely bring down the number of trips on Brita with moving vehicle maintenance and special services. But Greg, do you have something to add?
No, I think you pretty well covered it, Lee. I think that, simplifying the circulation through the site was one of our primary goals. And to do that, removing all that extra vehicular traffic, I think is important. But also search and rescue has its own space expansion requirements as well. So if you can imagine it growing where it is, there would be no more room for parking at all. So it's just one of the compromises I think we had to make so that we could shoehorn all this program into a site with a definitive boundary.
Oh, an update for the map. We actually have 7 additional cabins at the Veterans Village, and they haven't been noted on the diagram. So I do believe they're in legally. So,
and we'll add that to the final version that we bring back in the near future.
So is this publishing the public safety campus plan? Is that kind of the state we're in? Because, we're not really making a decision today, but this is kind of landing this project, saying these are the next phases as we see them.
And yes, it is. That's correct. And I also want to add that there will be multiple decision points as we go forward. Really, this is to provide the board an opportunity to create a frame of reference and a vision for the campus. So as those individual projects and needs arise over the next few years, in addition to the near-term opportunities we've already identified, there's a place to hang those projects, and there's a decision-making framework to give the board some background information as you make those decisions.
Well, and then for the jail itself, the connection back to the administration building and the meeting rooms and the some of the upgrades that are proposed there are very important, and we've been talking about them for years. And I think of the kitchen and the laundry. Every time we do a tour there, we've grown the facility and we haven't grown the support services. So that project will provide some elbow room for being able to just walk in and walk out and do the services required.
Lee, I wasn't here in 2018 when the plan was last updated. So I'd like to get a better sense of how this campus plan relates to the financial planning that's going to come next or in parallel, so that we can figure out how we actually implement what's in this plan. Can you talk a little bit about how that process works?
I think at this point, I see it kind of as a two-step process. One was to identify specifically uses on the campus, come together with a shared vision that the board has the opportunity to approve. From there, then, as we look at the needs that have been identified for near, mid, and long term, one thing I'd like to point out is that those needs that we've identified aren't necessarily all of the needs. That's the outcome of a collaborative kind of prioritization on the basis of the stakeholders or the steering committee members. So for example, the stabilization center could expand today if funding were available. But in terms of the stakeholders and them coming together as a group across various delivery models of services, they work together to prioritize at this point in the near term, mostly projects associated with the sheriff's office. But to your question, as we move forward, the next steps will be to work with the Board of Commissioners to affirm those priorities. These are currently the priorities that the steering committee is proposing. First, identify and confirm that those are the priorities the board would like us to move forward with. We currently have conceptual design for the projects at the sheriff's office. That's really the base starting point for providing cost estimates. And then as we go forward, as those other projects come to light and we spend some money up front to further develop those concepts, then we can get more accurate cost estimates. So initially, as we plan for costs, what we've worked through with the sheriff's office is that initial expansion for those services that Greg described, evidence storage, visitation at the jail, bringing those two buildings together, and a second story additional administrative space. That cost estimate currently is in the $20 million range for that expansion. And the next step will be to take a further dive and look at how that might be financed. And as we know, going into budget season, there's some challenges that we'll be looking at and addressing and reviewing, but that's really the stage that we're at now. We have for schematic and conceptual design, that's the starting point. We've got fairly, we feel, accurate cost estimates based on that level of design for the board to review and for the sheriff's office and the finance department to look at what financing options may be possible.
To paraphrase Captain Schultz, who's worked in the jail and came from Portland, he said he would really appreciate it not being like a dungeon and with skylights. But can skylights be leaky things? I mean, can they be an issue when you're building on this level? I mean, anyway, but he had really said it would be so good for it not to be such a dungeon.
Yeah, skylights, we've managed to find a way to install them without them leaking. They occasionally leak. I'm sure all of our stakeholders here have been near a skylight that leaks, but that's a good option for providing outdoor light. And specifically, as we look at that near-term proposal with additional mental health housing, lighting is a critical part of that, both for inmates and for staff. And that it's a topic that Greg is passionate about, and I'll let him just say a few words related to the outdoor light.
Yeah,
Well, also to quote Captain Schultz, it was 30% of the people that were in the jail were mentally ill and or substance use disorder, or a combination of both, and now it's 80% in Deschutes County Jail. So we've clearly seen our population going in a serious direction that needs more
And
help.
one of our goals through this project that came out early from feedback from jail staff was the need to right size that allocation of beds between regular beds and housing and mental health and healthcare housing. And Greg, if you'd like to touch base on that real quick, it could be.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that when you see the expansion of the jail, that's really not providing a lot more beds for capacity. It's really about providing appropriate beds for the types of inmates that you have there. And with the issue that you see with mental health in Deschutes County is an issue that every county in the United States is dealing with. And how do you deal with this very ill population in a setting like a jail that hasn't been designed for treating them? So we talked at length about opportunities for daylight, opportunities for programs, opportunities for visiting. Those would be key elements of that future expansion of the jail.
Thank you, Greg, for those words.
Sure.
Do you have any follow-up about the lighting and the skylights?
Well, Lee probably knows about the
Kind of like that was your thing.
he knows the maintenance aspect of it better than I do, but we often use more of a clear story approach to glass. So it's a vertical glazing that brings in the light, and you can also manage how much solar gain you get, so you're not overheating a space. So every project is unique, but providing abundant light, as Lee mentioned, not just for the inmates, but for staff who actually spend more time in the jail than most of the inmates do, is something that's really important to us.
That's what I was thinking of too, the people that are working there.
Yeah,
Yeah, to keep them mentally in a better spot.
agreed.
So is there any other follow-up? I'm just gonna ask, I just asked Brenda before this started that I wanted my packet printed on a easier to read level. So she's gonna do that for me.
Any additional questions or additional information we can provide?
The idea of a detox center or a sobering center has been raised a few times by the sheriff's office and other county departments. Has there been any thought of placing that here on the public safety campus, or is that envisioned for somewhere else?
So through the planning process, we didn't identify a location in that for a detox center or sobering center on the campus. It also didn't really rise to the top of those priorities for the campus, given the constraints there and the goal of focusing on services. So it didn't arise as a potential location for that type of additional service. And that's a service that's currently not provided on the campus. But I think Lieutenant Gill is here, and folks from Health Services, either the Sheriff's Office or Health Services, could probably address that question more in depth.
Did Lieutenant Gill want to add anything at this moment?
Come on up.
Welcome, you're here.
Come on to the mic.
No, you need to come to them and identify yourself for the record, please. Thank you so much for being here today.
Was here just as a cheerleader.
Cheerleader, where are your pom-poms?
Uh-oh.
I think I would pair it I'm Mike Gill. I'm the administrative lieutenant in the corrections division at the sheriff's office. I would echo what Lee said. It wasn't one of our priorities. And I think a sobering center is more of a health services function. It would not be a sheriff's office function because it is related more to health. I know a long time ago, as part of the stabilization center, there was some discussion about sobering adjacent to that, but there's licensing requirements and I'm just not familiar with that. That's not my.
There wasn't enough room, honestly, and I think to blend the two wasn't really what we could do at the time, but I do believe that there is a tremendous need for the damages of alcohol to our population.
Absolutely.
Alcohol and other substances.
Oh, yes, and other substances, gee. Okay, anything else?
The extent of our presentation. Any additional questions?
So what I'm taking away from this is, we've got like maybe a $20 million bite to take out of this in the next 5 years. Also, if we, start to even work down on that parcel that is the rock outcropping, that could be $5 million just to get it flat and get the roads in before we can even do anything. So, it is good to put it in perspective, the big picture items that we're going to need to take on. We can break it into smaller pieces and proceed as we have resources, obviously, or, just take a big step at some point if the environment's right for doing that. So that's the big takeaway for me, is understanding the scope of what we have ahead of us.
And we plan to provide a short period of time over the next week or so if there's additional feedback that you'd like to provide directly to the team that you'd like to see incorporated into a final version. And then, as I mentioned at the outset, we look forward to bringing the plan back for final adoption and approval by the board in the very near future. Right. And I do want to thank you all. You've been involved in this process as well from the beginning. We've had multiple meetings with you, providing updates and the level of design and the phasing of the project. And we appreciate all your feedback along the way. And we thank you for your time today.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Lieutenant Gill.
Thank you.
Okay, we have now item number 5. Nick Leland, your name is on it.
Thank you. And Allison Platt, the core area service
Yes.
project manager for the city of Bend is here as well. So if you're welcome to join us if you would like, or not, if there's questions, certainly your call. This is the multiple unit property tax exemption application for the Penn Avenue development at 445 Northeast Penn Avenue. The board had previously approved this application for the MUPD program, as it's referred to. This is one of the projects that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is outside of the core increment, core tax increment finance area, the TIF area. And the project is back before the board because it has been revised and amended to add an additional 19 units. And since the whole team is here, rather than my summarizing it all, if I can, now that you're all here, let me just turn it over to you and you can summarize what the changes are and why you're back and the decision you're seeking from the Board of Commissioners. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, County Administrator Nick. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Allison Platt with the City of Bend. I'm joined today by the applicant for this property tax exemption.
Ryan Andrews with Hiatus Homes.
And Jesse Russell with Hiatus Homes.
Carrie Bell, Middle Income Coordinator for the City of Bend.
So I think Nick did a great job of kind of explaining this application, but this applicant, Hiatus Homes, initially applied for this program and you had reviewed their application. They've since revised their project to add an additional 19 units to this site, including an additional 6 that would be dedicated to middle income levels. So that's dedicated to folks who are earning an income between 80 to 120% area median income. So about 30% of the total units in the project would be serving those income levels. When they submitted their pro forma for the project, we actually found that the rental levels for 27 of the 59 units would be within the middle income range, but those 18 units would actually be deed restricted to folks making that income. So just wanted to kind of clarify that. They're also going to be providing enhanced stormwater facilities to treat a 100-year stormwater event. We require for the MUPD program that they at least treat over a 25-year storm event. And then they'll also be providing EV charging infrastructure for half of the parking spaces. And we're here if you have any more questions about the
Adding units is adding a floor, maybe? Is that what happened here?
No, actually, we were fortunate in that the way our building was designed, I hit a step back on the third story. So we were able to, the units are very small. They're under 450 square feet. So we were able to add units there and it's a kind of a U-shaped building. So we removed the tuck under parking that we had there. And we're able to add units there as well. So we didn't have to actually add a story and we were able to stay in the same footprint. So we're still under the same building permit. It was a revised building permit instead of having to go through the process. So worked with the city on that. And we're at a stage now where we have our building permit is ready for issuance. So and also with the MUPD program and also adding the units, we were able to get our pro forma to work so that we can actually build the building and be successful in that.
And then on site is minimal parking. Is that what
Yeah, very minimal parking in this building. There's 9 parking spaces. We look at this building, the location of it, we feel is very good for the Central District as it starts to build out to be very walkable. It's right by the Wagner Mall, over by the Yacht Club, and then just kind of a straight shot to COCC. It's within a transit station as well. So we felt like it was a great chance for us to try to do a building of this type with a minimal parking.
And do you want to add a little bit more about the bicycle parking?
Yeah, sure. We also have EV charging stations that are outside the units, and then this is under the micro apartment code that we passed a little while ago. All of the units will also have bike storage in the units.
Are the EV charging stations connected to those 9 parking spaces or are those?
They are not. No, they're separate. Yeah. So if you imagine it as kind of a U shape and the entry to the building is here along that side, there's an overhang that's the deck that's above it with one of the common areas. There's outlets there to charge bicycles.
Well, so as a reminder, can you explain the situation with not being in the central core district? Is this under an existing tax increment financing situation? As I say now, I've struggled with some of these and voted yes and no on them, so I'm just kind of remembering the scope of.
Because it's outside of the TIF boundary, then there are tax implications for our taxing districts. And I see Allison pulling the map up, but it's just outside, if I can see correctly, but it is outside.
Yeah, this property is just outside the core area. TIF area, it's within that high density residential zone, kind of adjacent to 4th Street. Because of that, this project would, right now this site generates about $3,000 annually. Their property tax bill is about $3,000 annually. So the county receives about 15% of that $3,000 bill. So big bucks coming your way
250
on that site today. If no development takes place on that site, the property taxes will remain approximately $3,000 on that site. You'll continue to collect, $250. If this development moves forward, the only way it can move forward is with this property tax exemption. You'll continue to collect that same amount. The land will continue to be taxed throughout that exemption period. And then in year 11, following that exemption period expiring, you'll receive 50 times higher revenue and taxes on this site. Following that tax exemption. If no project moves forward within that 10-year period, the applicant is the sole owner of that site. They own the land free and clear, and would really like to be the developers of that site. So we're not anticipating a different project being pursued on that site. This is sort of the maximum potential tax generation project that you'll be able to realize on that site. But it can't move forward without this exemption. So if that kind of helps, you'll continue to collect the same amount of taxes on it for a 10-year period. And then in year 11, all of the taxing districts would see that 50 times increase to their tax generation on this site if this project moves forward.
Has the school and the city reviewed and approved this, or?
Yeah, so this has been approved by the park board who approved it. The city council reviewed this application last week and approved it unanimously. And then we're hoping to get your input before the before the school district reviews on May 14th.
And so what will be the rents in these at the deed restricted 120 AMI? What would be the rent for 450 square feet? Are they studios?
They're actually open. It's kind of a unique design. It's similar to what we've done in our smaller cottages. So it has a lofted bedroom. So the ceilings are around 13 feet high. So when you walk into your unit, you're greeted by a really large windows that flood light into the room. And then there's stairs on the adjacent wall that go up to a lofted bedroom. And then underneath that is a kitchenette and the bathroom.
Yeah, so the 27 units that the pro forma demonstrated would meet sort of the middle income rental levels are all planned to be about $1,700 a month in rent. And then, but again, because they would be deed restricted as our area median income levels, change over time, those 18 units would be deed restricted to folks making, right now that AMI level for 120% is $79,000 for a family of one. So if you're making essentially under $80,000, you would qualify to be living in that rental unit. And that the max rent that they would be able to charge is $1,900, essentially. $1,998
$1,998
would be the max amount at using the AMI levels for today. So
today's levels.
But their pro forma indicates that they're planning to charge $1,772 for those units. Ryan is the financial guru. So
Yeah, we have, good question on the rents. So almost the units are all very similar. They all have that lofted one bedroom design or open one bedroom design. So it's kind of an upgraded take on the studio, and is similar to some of our small homes that we've built in the city over the last several years. We tried to take that design and stack a bunch of them into a building. So these are for small households, 1 or 2 people max. We sat down and analyzed our rents based on who's got a deck. Do you have a view? Do you not have a view? What level are you on? There's different, kind of amenities within the building. we believe 27 of those 59 units are just naturally going to fall below the 1998 per month rent level, as just if we rented them out in the market. Now, we'll deed restrict 18 of them if we get MUPT, so they will be legally guaranteed for 10 years to be affordable to tenants at that level. But the building will hopefully naturally create some what we like to call attainable by design housing. So rents that are affordable to small households at that income level. And then some of the units on the top floor with amazing west side views will be higher than that, and hopefully higher than that, because the building needs that revenue in order to make sense for the investors and everything over the long term. So it'll be a mix of rents. I think the low is in the $1,400 range, and the high is I think in like the $2,500 a month range, $2,600 a month range.
Amazing.
So you just said it's the low is now 1,300?
Yeah, on average, I think what Allison was nodding to was on average, the rents are 1,700 for those 27 units. That's a mix. They're not all exactly 1,700. I think the lowest ones, when we broke it down unit by unit, are in the $1,300 or $1,400 range as a per month rental price.
I think another thing to consider is that when the state of Oregon passed House Bill 2001, I was part of that stakeholder group that decided what we were going to do in Bend with that. We added an additional cottage code. We added small unit development code, and we also added the code that enabled us to do the micro apartment. So this is the first use of this code, and that the spirit of that code was to try to have this type of housing in Bend. It's also, I think, a really unique building in that we're using this code that hopefully can be an example for other developers to do this type of housing.
I was just talking to a couple people that work in commercial with one of our local credit unions, and they said that people, our last number before they commingled it with Redmond was that the apartment vacancy in Bend was 9.4%. Had a meeting yesterday with the mayor, and she seemed incredibly surprised about that number. But the gentleman that I was talking to said people don't want to move somewhere where they don't have parking. It reminds me of Santa Monica, when you used to have to drive around for like an hour to find a parking spot. So I find it unfortunate that you've cut down the number of spots, because clearly somebody that lives there that wants to shop at Costco is going to have a really hard time if they can't, if they can't park their car close.
Yeah, sure. And that's the risk that we're taking as developers, is that we think that there are people that will use transit and will use bikes to get around. So I think this comes up a lot with the contention of removing parking or keeping parking. And what I think Ben did was give us as developers the option to try different things to see if they work. We have a really difficult problem here with housing, and I think there's a lot of solutions that we need to be able to try. And so I'm excited that we were afforded the opportunity to try this.
But even when the rental vacancy was 8.7%, that was historically high per the documentation that we received from our treasurer. So if that's high and you're approaching that market, I just think it's something you should be aware of.
Thank you for that. We'll consider that.
Yeah, we are seeing significant vacancy, opportunities in apartment buildings in Bend. There's been a surge of apartment building construction in the last few years. Besides where this project is situated in the community and the unique transportation options that it presents, can you talk a little bit about how these micro units or other aspects of this building and this design kind of would distinguish these apartments within that market that we're talking about?
Yeah, thanks. One of the other things that code requires and supports is community spaces. So when we did our first cottage development, one of the things that was really important to us was that we had these community spaces. So one of the developments we did was 22 cottages, and it has a pond, it has walking paths, it has a fire pit, it has these spaces that kind of create a community within the development. What we really liked about the micro apartment code is that we also have that in the apartment. So on each floor, there's a community space that has a full kitchen, full dining area, and also spaces to hang out, like kind of co-working type spaces. So we see this as being a really unique product in that, you know, a single or couple that has just moved to Bend that doesn't really know anybody or is maybe commuting online, it gives them a sense of community within the apartment itself.
Yeah, so this is something that is unique within the Bend market, and so if we believe that we need a real diversity of housing types to meet all the needs and demands in our community, I can see where this creates a niche that hasn't even existed before.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the questions some of the other taxing districts have had around us is around our investors and the feasibility of the project, given the economic environment that's happened over the last 2 years. So interest rates going up has changed the multifamily development space really significantly, just as it has mortgages and single family homes. We've seen the number of transactions for single family homes go down almost 40% over the last couple of years because interest rates, it's really hard to afford a home. And so, that's changed the dynamic. There were a bunch of not hotels, apartment buildings that were built that created a lot of supply around the same time as, the interest rates went up and people stopped selling homes and moving around because they couldn't afford to sell their home and buy a new home at a new mortgage rate that's at 7 when their old mortgage rate was at 3. And so I think some of the economic macroeconomic dynamics have led to the higher vacancy than we've seen in several years here in Bend at that 9 point something level. When this building is delivered a year and a half or so from now, we think that will have changed again. The macro environment will hopefully have come down. Interest rates will hopefully have come down, and many apartment buildings that were in development stopped or paused because of the financing challenges that they face, just like we have. And so we might end up 2 years from now where there's very few new apartments coming online in this community. So we're trying to move ahead with our project, despite the fact that construction loans have gotten expensive, financing has gotten very hard. That's part of the environment that has made this building only able to pencil economically with the MUPT program. And so, because you have to plan housing so many years in advance, it becomes very lumpy in its delivery to the community. And so maybe there was a big lump of delivery a year or two ago. Now there's likely to be a very small lump of delivery in the next couple of years because many projects pause, not all. And so we're trying to move our project forward. One of the ways that we're lucky and have a competitive advantage in being able to do that is we are capitalized by about 50 local investors. So we have a fund that we've used to buy land, pay for designs, pay for entitlements. That fund is made up of about 50 people, and little over 3/4 of those are local. And so when our projects are successful, if there's profits, the money doesn't go back out of the community and go back to some Wall Street bank or commercial bank or something, and out of area developer. It goes back to individuals, what we call mom and pop developers that are local here. They live in our community, they care about our projects, and then we'll hopefully put that money back in. Why that gives us an advantage is they're not just looking at the numbers. And we had an investor that gave public comment when we were before the Bend Parks and Rec Board that said, talked about, he's in this fund not for just financial returns. He's in this fund because he wants to see this type of housing built and delivered to the community. And then hopefully it'll proliferate more and more, and consumers of housing will have more options. And so we're able to bring a project that's maybe less profitable to market than another developer were. If this were an out of area developer, they might just pull the plug on it and just sit on the land for 10 years. We're trying not to do that. We're trying to move forward, deliver 59 units. They're a little bit unique. We think they have some awesome competitive advantages. No, they don't have traditional parking, but that's one of the ways we were able to get more density. And, we feel like the city's encouraging developers to move in that direction. So as a community, we maybe become less dependent on cars over time. Until then, there is street parking. This is very bike centric. So hopefully we'll find 59 amazing tenants a year and a half or 2 years from now to be able to live in this building.
Are there any other questions?
I'm ready to start deliberating.
Okay, are you making a motion?
Well, I would say a few things before we get to a motion. I think it's really important to note that the school, that the city and the park district have already approved this MUPTI. I think it's also really important to note that we already approved this MUPTI application previously, and now we're seeing a bigger project with more benefits. But just kind of looking at the calculus of getting to 50%, the fact that the park district has approved this MUPTI, I think is pretty predictive that if we don't support this, I'm guessing that the school district is still going to support it. So I don't see any reason not to be part of the consensus that moves this project forward rather than resisting it. I also think it's really important to note that this is a very unique kind of housing opportunity that we have not seen in the city of Bend, or I believe in Deschutes County before. And in a lot of ways, it's more like a college dormitory than an apartment building. And when I think about a college dormitory, I also think about there not being a whole lot of parking associated with that. So people who are familiar with that kind of living and having that really nice common kitchen for a floor, I can see how there's this creates a certain market niche that many people will already be very familiar with. So the last thing I would say is that we're getting, the county's collecting $3,000 of property tax per year on this property. That's all we're going to be collecting in the foreseeable future if this project doesn't move forward. So I don't see a huge downside to supporting this MUPTI that will then deliver us a much higher assessed value property tax delivery within 10 years. So those are just arguments I would offer in favor of approving this MUPTI application.
So are you making a motion then?
I can't. I'm just waiting to see if anyone wanted to discuss.
Nothing?
I mean,
I've already said what I have been reading the trends in the community, and I already made those comments.
okay. Well, I'll float a motion. Move approval of the application from Hiatus Homes for a multiple unit property tax exemption relating to property at 445 Northeast Penn Avenue in Bend.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'm not going to second it.
Yes, neither am I. So, therefore,
So I know there's a lot of effort in this. I can see the vision about what you're doing here. We do struggle with this. As you just heard, we've got huge expenses on the horizon. The financial path is narrowing for Deschutes County in the near future. If there's support by the other districts, fine. We're going to be basically required to participate. But yeah, I'm hesitant to lead with support at this time.
Thank you, though. Sorry. Okay, we're now actually going to item number 12 because there's a issue. Kathleen, are you here? Yes, thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. Kathleen Hinman, for the record, HR Director, Deschutes County. And online, I do have our HR consultants, Lori and Anna. So just want to make sure that we can get them on. Perfect.
Stephen, are we lucky? Can we get them on?
If we're lucky.
Yes. Is it going to work today? We never know with our technology.
I'll go ahead and start with just an introduction of the materials that I provided in your box, and we'll hand it over to HR Answers as we move forward. But recap of what we were discussing, the Salary Market and Equity Review Project, and its particular direction that we're looking for is defining the labor market to be used. We provided a couple of recommended motions. There's some options here that we can look at. We have outlined in the materials, you'll see here a summary of what the input was from the department and office leadership in terms of how they would like to see our labor market defined in terms of what it should be doing. So for example, the county's compensation design should provide competitive salary and benefits that attract and retain high quality candidates, recognizing the high cost of living in Deschutes County. At minimum, the county should meet the market and should exceed or lead the market to attract and retain high quality workforce. And then there were some specifics that the county should look to other city, county, state, federal governments and select private sector employers as the county's competition for talent. And specifically some counties that were listed: Washington, Multnomah, Clackamas, Marion, Lane, and City of Bend, and then other select private employers in the region. So with that support from our department leadership, the following options were put together to present to you today for consideration. So option one, and I want to point it out before Commissioner Adair finds it.
A number of
Yeah. So in my
I'm not doing my job if I don't find those things, right?
enough time.
That's
So,
okay.
in option 1 and 1A, I noticed that I did not update the population for Deschutes County, just as it is in the third chart there. So we do have a slightly higher population. Which kind of
We gained a lot of people in
did. We
3
got-
seconds.
Yeah. So just wanted to note that. So option 1, we are looking at, and this is just going to be a brief overview, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the details as to why we're making some of these observations or recommendations of our market. So the first one would be to just stay as we are, right? Using Deschutes County comparables of Clackamas, Marion, Lane, and Jackson. We had discussed earlier about how you look at comparables, and we often look to population and budget to kind of identify what other counties are doing work that is might be similar to ours. And then there's a geographic adjustment applied to this. This is what we did in the first or the last study that we did. And it's standard and comp work. We will get into that in a little bit, so I won't sort of dwell on that right now. We have a 1A, which is a slight variation of 1, which is to continue to use the established comparables that were listed there, but also add in that aggregator surveys, which we touched on last conversation, which bring in that private or even regional data point for the market. So that would be an option there in a 1A with that slight adjustment. Option 2 is where we would either add, keep, remove some different comparables. This would include Washington, Multnomah, City of Bend, and then adding in those aggregator surveys of private and regional. And then there was there was support from department leadership to not continue to use Jackson County, even though population is a little bit more similar to ours, however, budget is not. And option 3 is to just use the aggregator surveys. And so I think the main differences between options 1, 1A, 2, and then 3 are that we would be identifying specific organizations to go and pull and look at their data. Well, that data is included in the aggregator surveys already. And that is one of the reasons why option 3 is the recommendation from the consultants. And I'll let them talk about that. It does cut down on the time involved and the cost of going out specifically to do what they call direct survey of an organization. But these are the options that we came up with. There's a couple of things here that I think are that we should discuss, which is the geographic adjustment. And then if we are looking at including the aggregator surveys, there are some specifics that we'll have to consider. So what model type we would use, and that would include things like in that last, the more colorful chart, would we just look at a geographic location of Deschutes County? We would look at a regional, Oregon, Idaho, Washington, Colorado was what was kind of discussed at the department leadership level, or Oregon wide. And we can kind of see the impacts of those decisions as we walk through the geographic adjustments.
Could you explain the geographic adjustment? So the $82,000 is just number and then the percentage relative to others and how?
I am going to hand it.
Yeah. So just explain how that works. Yep.
Answer that question for you. Lori, Anna, do you want to take that?
Great. I'll take that. Hello, Lori Grenia with HR Answers for the record. In the geographic adjustment, again, this is a pillar to best compensation practice, that when you gain information from a locale that is not relative to yours, and relative has typically meant within a 25-mile, at some cases it's 50 miles, just depends on how urban your territory is, commute shed. That again, it's a standard compensation practice. So we used $82,000 to help, and I'm going to draw you to example or option 2 to further explain this. $82,000 being the median income of a Deschutes County employee. We wanted to start there because that would then tell you this is more real than not associated with what you're looking at. If I'm looking at Clackamas County and I'm looking at a job that is paying $82,000, or the job in Deschutes is $82,000. In order to correlate a Clackamas job to a Deschutes job, I would only take 92.2% of the Clackamas dollars reported to make it relative to Deschutes. In Marion County, you see we've graded that out. It's 98.7. That number is below 2% of 100. And if it's less than 2%, I think I mentioned this in our previous discussions, then no adjustment need be made. In Lane County, we would actually be increasing those numbers. I'm sorry, it's gray, so it's less than 2%. If that were 102.2, let's say, which we have one of those in the Deschutes Regional at the $75,000 mark, then we would be increasing the numbers. So if the percentage shows over 100 and at or over 102, we increase the numbers reported. If it is below, at or below 98%, we reduce the numbers. So
this is information. This is real-time information now. I mean, so this is more information than we had before. When you have the 99-101, I'm just thinking that's new information that I haven't, that's your world that you're sharing with us, I guess, is what I'm acknowledging here.
Yes. And part of what we want to make sure is what was asked for in the RFP was using best compensation practice. Compensation practice does include geographic adjustments to jobs based or data associated with jobs based on where that data is coming from and where it will be used. So in any situation where there's more than a 2% swing from the 100%, we would apply those. This practice was utilized in 17 by your previous consultant.
I think a little bit of information as to what goes into geographic adjustments. I think a lot of folks zero in on cost of housing, and when we look at the two factors that go into a geographic adjustment, it is a cost of living and a cost of labor. So it looks at those, and those are defined, right, by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so cost of living includes 20 different factors, where housing is one of those, but there are many different factors that go into determining what the cost of living is in that area. And then cost of labor has 6 specific factors that it looks at. So in taking into account all of those, the recommended geographic adjustments from and we'd be using Economic Research Institute are what's listed here. So that's what a geographic adjustment is, which is it's a component of the comp program.
So I would ask Nick, this is our choice as commissioners, but you've been meeting with department heads on this, and is there any input you can give us? I don't want to be out on a ledge here without input from our department managers and staff as you've seen it recently.
At the department head level, we haven't talked about the aggregate data. We haven't talked about this new methodology. All we've really talked about have been the comparable counties: Clackamas, Marion Lane, possibly Washington,
which we've always done, so we all kind of know it.
Yeah. So that's kind of those are the known, or City of Bend, State of Oregon, others have been raised as well. So at the department head level, and I haven't learned a whole lot about this as this has been developed and proposed here over the last week, really. And so I'm really relying on Kathleen and our consultants.
Well, I was just making sure you're engaged in, sharing with what you might know on this subject, but now I understand.
So, Lori, I have a question. Oregon has been losing population. And you're saying you're going to look at Idaho, Washington, and Colorado, but we've been losing population. Now, when people leave Deschutes County, if they stay in Oregon, they go to Crook County, but otherwise they'll leave Oregon. And so I'm wondering, with the current exodus at this point in time, I think our population now, the last number I heard was like 1.5% growth, and we were up to 3 above that. Going with your third recommendation, option number 3, how does that population leaving, you think they're going to come here for a job? Is that what you're trying to tell us?
This actually doesn't have a lot to do with individuals who are leaving or coming to the state. Again, as Kathleen had mentioned, and is true, the geographic adjustments that would be made are relative to those within the state, either providing employment or as a consumer within the state. The Deschutes regional area that was put together there, as far as Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Colorado, was a suggestion of something that could be utilized. My strong recommendation would be that you use Deschutes County as the geographic location that we're looking at, because it gives you a more refined number associated with the activity of those actually living in your space and the employment that you're providing in that space. If we bring that out to a more regional look, the numbers become more watered down associated with the variances in each of those areas.
So when you say Deschutes County, then that means the City of Bend's information will be in that.
Yes, because it's a regional look at the entire geography of Deschutes County.
Okay.
And the regional really was, that concept was born out of the conversation with department leadership, where they were looking at where do we look for talent? Where's our talent coming from? And there was a lot of discussion around what that looks like in Oregon, Idaho, Washington, and Colorado was kind of what we kept hearing. And so we created that as an option there. And I think just as an FYI on the geographic adjustment, I mean, that was something that was done in the 2017. It's a best practice. It's one that we would see from any consultant that is that's standard in this type of compensation work. It's really where we want to talk about where we go to find work that's being done similar to Deschutes County, or who are we competing with for talent for that work.
Okay, thank you.
Kathleen, have we asked you for your recommendation yet? I mean, if you were to make a recommendation with a set of pros and cons associated with that.
Yeah. So with the geographic adjustments, I know that there's been a lot of interest in including Washington and Multnomah County, and I hear that often from our leadership. And this is probably not going to be the most popular comment I'm going to make here. But the reality is when we apply those geographic adjustments, we often see that those depending upon the position, those counties can pay more than Deschutes County in some of the areas. But when you apply that geographic adjustment to consider the cost of labor and the cost of living, we actually will sort of
balance
level,
yeah.
Right, those pieces. And because they're so much larger, the population and the budget, it doesn't appear to be, and oftentimes do work very different. I mean, if you take the HR departments, for example, we are nowhere near the same size. Nor do we have the same work that we do. So for me, when we look at that, there's probably a couple of areas in the county, at Deschutes County, that do work similar to the way in which it's done at Multnomah, Washington. But it doesn't necessarily make sense for me to include that here when we apply that geographic adjustment, especially because it just levels it. So with that in mind, option 3 from the consultants is an interesting one because it's easier, frankly. We just go to one area and we pull a couple of bits of information and we can move forward. We're guaranteed that we've got good matches. We have enough matches for our positions. It's also a little bit more cost effective, both in time, right, and finances. So there is something very appealing to that.
So what is the lesser cost then?
Right. So the lesser cost really is in time, because with a direct survey, as I think that we mentioned last time, we have to send out, we're probably going to send out about 85 classifications that we're looking for all these other counties to then respond with saying, I have a match, I don't have a match. Then we have to review to make sure that they did indeed have a match or not have a match. And we have to make sure that the compensation that they're giving us is accurate. So we're double checking that work.
So 85 times 5 jurisdictions
Right.
or data points. Yeah.
Exactly. It can be a lot of work. I think that the list that we originally had with Clackamas, Marion, Lane, and Jackson, and looking at our population and our budget, and then applying any geographic adjustments as necessary, seems to be a good approach.
Right in there.
It was interesting when Lori completed, she did do a regression analysis of comparable agencies within Oregon for us. And as you might imagine, there weren't many, if any. There was not anyone. We're just at a population level and a budget level where we're not seeing a lot of competition. There's a lot of smaller counties. There's a lot of larger counties. But in terms of for example, budget closest one is Marion, population closest one is Jackson. But then if you look at their, but it doesn't really fit with the way we do the work. So for me, we should really be using something that includes that aggregator surveys so that we get the additional information there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I support aggregator surveys, and we started to go down that last time we met. So the big choice is, do we not go through our historical comparators or not?
If this is Anna Lee with HR Answers. I'm the primary consultant on this project. And I just want to also kind of elaborate a little bit on Kathleen and Lori's comments in regards to using the aggregator. What we believe is that it will meet your goals of private and public and all other industries, because it is an aggregator. Those two that we would recommend using is ERI, Economic Research Institute, and Comp Analyst. And so the matches are going to be more consistent throughout the county for those, as well as if we use the four that Deschutes has used in the past, we may not have four firm results on each one of our positions that we're looking for. And for us, four is at the least amount to actually have a market adjustment or market information to make, to inform our decisions to you as a county in regards to pay. So by using the aggregators, we believe that it will meet our assessment will meet the goals of the county in regards to gathering that information necessary to inform your decisions. Thank you.
So if we start to do all this analysis and the aggregator comes up with, and it looks like there's an outlier, and I'm just kind of generically, I don't know exactly what that scenario would be. What would the backup plan be? Would we go out to our comparators or our historical comparators?
So the backup plan, and I just want to echo again, very unlikely. I don't believe that any of you were actually part of the evaluation process associated with these, but we do hundreds of these studies on a regular basis. And these, and for government specifically, I never once have needed a backup plan when the aggregators are what are being utilized. So I want to say that. However, could we absolutely reach out to those individuals with a lesser scope and have a likely return of quality information for some of your jobs? Yes, absolutely, we could do that if indeed we were unable to find reliable and substantive, because again, there's a process associated called benchmarking to gather the information itself.
Okay, I'm just thinking either a department head comes to us and says, "Oh, this isn't going to work in my department," or there's an outlier just looking at the spreadsheet and some percentage just jumps right out. But yeah, that's what we hire you for.
Yeah, and I will say I certainly appreciate kind of the outlier concept and the potential that something appears not to be working. And this is where I remind people we are gathering data to inform decision making. So if indeed, and again, I fully believe we will not have any issue gathering data out of aggregator sources for support of Deschutes County. However, if somebody is saying that doesn't work for us, that is where informed decision making also needs to consider, why don't you think that works? What are we experiencing there? And that should alter then and help with the information around ultimately where are you going to land as an organization in providing compensation to your valuable employees.
Great, thank you.
And so in a scenario where that comes up, where there's a specific disagreement between HR and a given department, are you saying then we can sort of triangulate in a case specific way for that position, or and how and what would be the process to do that?
Yeah, so there are three primary criteria that have to be looked at when deciding pay at a minimum. So let's start with that. The very first one is something you're already doing and is part of our review process, which is the evaluation internally of work. How is it valued? And where are there comparable roles within your organization? That's that legal pay equity piece that we have to get over. That is part of the information. Because if we do have comparable jobs, we have no choice on pay, but to pay them the same. What the same will be is the choice. Secondarily is to have market information that says where in alignment with your compensation structures should we place an individual job. Third is in alignment with the hierarchy. How do roles report to each other? Where do the authority levels come into play? Has to be considered to make sure we don't create compression. it is wholly possible and rare, but wholly possible that in a salary survey, especially if we're considering data from some sources, but not consistently from all of those sources, that we may see something. So like if option 2 were chosen, we may see an inversion between maybe a supervisor and a staff person. Well, that doesn't make sense. From a hierarchy perspective within your organization, that would also need to be fixed. Those are the things that when gathering information and reviewing how do jobs compare, what is the market for the jobs, what is the hierarchy for the jobs with each of the departments, is where we gather those pieces of information relevant to each of those to, again, inform the decision making. So no portion of those 3 steps are done in isolation or without feedback. And that information needs to be solved along the way so that we're all working from the same set of standards around how do we get to that end result of pay for the organization.
And I might add that we would be good to be able to say, if we, like you said, if the odds are that we're not going to find a match for a position or there's a disagreement, where do we default to? What is the default? So it's consistent, just like the aggregate surveys are consistent for all positions. What would be the second tier as far as the next level of evaluation for that position for market to be able to apply that? So it's all agreed upon before we start the survey.
Commissioner Chang, to fully answer your question, I think I actually have it now on what my recommendation would be. I'm going to recommend an option 4, and that would include Clackamas, Marion, and Lane County, no longer including Jackson County. It would include the aggregator surveys, but using Oregon so that we gain that metro perspective, and add City of Bend for those positions. And my reasoning for this is, for example, they just posted an HR position. I hope my team is not listening. For their road, it's the HR manager for the road department. And so I am concerned of that position. I'm not as concerned about a position opening up in Multnomah County. So that would be my recommendations, that we look at, and recognizing that City of Bend is not going to have all of our positions. But for those that they do have, they are positions in which we could realistically lose people to, but also gain people from.
So to repeat, your option 4, then you said Clackamas, Marion, Lane, City of Bend, and then aggregator.
Grounded in the aggregator survey.
Okay.
Oregon wide versus Deschutes County or Deschutes Regional.
Yeah, that sounds like a better option. Yes. Thank you for thinking.
And I think that's going to be more consistent with what I've heard from department heads, and I see at least a couple of heads shaking in the back, but that is reflective of what I've heard, because otherwise, if we were to go with just the data and the option 3, the calls would begin 5 minutes after this agenda's items over, just asking, so what does this mean? What, because I still don't have the full understanding. When I think about the geographic data and I think about the region, does that also include the city of Redmond and city of Sisters in addition to the city of Bend? Because there's one perception that geographic data means city of Bend. There's another if you think, okay, well, it's actually also the small city of Sisters or the city of Redmond that have other significant differences from our pay scale. So
Lapine, Prineville, Madras too. I mean, there's some different geography and local economies right here. But as I say, when we were talking the other day, we started to think about how adding aggregator survey, so that does fit right into where we started to kind of get to the other day, and then replacing Bend with Jackson is a commitment to our largest city and our
replacing Jackson with Bend.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you said it the other way.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I was listening.
It just makes a lot of sense, because that's where we might be losing people to, or gaining people from.
And when we lose people to Sisters or to Lapine, it's always it's a great loss, because I feel like they're still in our county and they're still part of our team, even though they're working somewhere else.
They come back.
Yes, and they can circle back. So can we have a motion then for that?
I would recommend we use the or motion and it would be option 4, and I would change it to with Oregon model.
Okay, with Oregon model.
So,
Not including the regional multi-state aggregate.
That was part of my recommendation.
Yeah, I'm just getting clarity on the.
So the rest of this phrased motion would be the same besides
Wait, so that second.
replacing. Move to approve the use of option 4 with Oregon model as the competitive labor market for Deschutes County in the salary market and equity review project.
Is there a second to the motion?
Well, I'll second it, confirming, replacing Jackson County with the city of Bend.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So thank you very much. Okay, we are now to item number 6. Sorry, 12 got ahead of you.
But hopefully that was interesting for you to hear.
Oh, fascinating, wasn't it?
Good morning, Ann Kilty, Clinical and Family Services Manager for Public Health. And I am here today to seek authorization to apply for 2 grants through OHA related to reproductive health services in our county. And I believe you have the numbers and the information before you. These are non-competitive grants with an application deadline, which is approaching on May 5th. And the first grant is part of the modernization funds, which is a total grant amount of $100,000. And then the second grant, which we apply for them together, if you approve both of them, is a $50,000 infrastructure grant to be used, both of those grants in direct provision of services in the clinics.
But I appreciate being able to kind of see the big picture here, because I know sometimes, even if it's non-competitive grant, why we go in front of the board, but when we do receive a grant, we have reporting requirements, which we really need to close up for our annual reporting. So just acknowledging, thank you for joining us today. And I'm supportive of both of these, Oregon Health Authority Reproductive Health Services, infrastructure and modernization, just line items for really, base services and having some capacity.
Commissioner Chang?
And no questions.
Okay,
So I'll move approval to apply to Oregon Health Authority Reproductive Health Services Infrastructure and Modernization Grants.
Second.
any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So thank you, Ann.
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We're now at item number 7. Jessica Jacks, I've seen you in the room.
Morning, or yes, still morning.
Yep. 10:30.
Jessica Jacks, Program Manager. Services. Hope you are well. I am here to request your review and approval of receiving additional funding that was unexpected from the Oregon Health Authority. This is specific to counties that are currently receiving Garrett Lee Smith Youth Suicide Prevention Grant funds, and Deschutes County is one of those counties. My understanding is the Oregon Health Authority had some additional resources, and we're looking at how to allocate them and came up with that proposal. So we learned of this several months ago. I've been kind of pivoting to ensure that we could take on the additional resources in an effective way. And the amount of those dollars, it's 2 different pots of money that are coming our direction, and that total is $64,840. The amount that needs your
approval today is the $49,840 that comes through Program Element 60. The way that we'll utilize those resources are, I'm going to bucket in 3 general categories. They are capacity building for our community. So we're looking at our community partners and examining what training needs do you have. So we have our school-based health center partners and our school-based staff partners that will be sending to additional training specific to suicide prevention and intervention. The second category is to purchase lock boxes and safes that can securely store medication, anything that might be a lethal means and can be locked up for a temporary period of time
For distribution for
For
people to receive? Okay.
And we have actually staff are picking up 2 pallets of those resources today through another funding mechanism, but we'll be expanding that purchase and have a plan to utilize partnerships with our local law enforcement as well as the DA's office in our schools to so that they have access and can distribute those resources as well. The third bucket of spending will be in advertising, specifically promoting our secure storage PSAs across our county to inform and encourage our community to safely store their firearms if they have them. Any questions?
Does anyone have a question?
That's a lot of stuff for only $49,000 or $64,840. It's great to have these additional funds.
Okay. So we need 2 motions then apparently.
I'll move approval of document number 2024-351 in Oregon Health Authority grant agreement number 180009-8.
And I will second it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
And now we need the other motion. We have a second motion.
Oh, we do.
Yes, a resolution approval. Does someone want to make that motion?
I can do that one. Move approval of resolution number 2024-013, increasing appropriations within the 2023 to 24 Deschutes County budget.
And I will second it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay.
Thank you.
I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Tariq, at item number 8.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. For the record, Tariq Rawlings, Senior Transportation Planner with the Community Development Department and the Road Department. Before you today is consideration of first reading of ordinance 2023-016, and this would be capturing an adoption of the amended Tumalo Community Plan. This follows deliberations on March 27th, and really pending any comments or discussion, we would come back 2 weeks from now, sort of following standard procedure for a second reading on May 8th, 2024. And that would really be kind of the final steps of this process, but today is just first reading and title only for that ordinance. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Nope, been through it a few times and it looks like it's pretty well stabilized.
Sure, and I'm sure you saw this. There's a kind of quick cheat sheet on page 3 of the memo or page 130 of your packet where it just shows where the page numbers of where those amendments from the board are located in the Tumalo Community Plan itself.
Yes, thank you for that page. So is there a motion?
I'll move first reading of ordinance number 2023-016, adopting the Tumalo Community Plan Update 2020 to 2040.
And just clarify, that'll be by title only.
Thank you very much. By title only, or we'd be here all afternoon.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? I just want to say that Tumalo is losing heritage brands, which has been an amazing small industry in that community with a national market. And yes, they're going to Texas, and they had just built their beautiful buildings, and it's I'm really sad to see them go. So anyway, yeah, just had to add that. Commissioner DeBonne
I'll vote yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
So yeah, I guess if we didn't read it by title only, it'd just be 2 pages of text. That wouldn't be too bad.
Okay, Bite and chair votes yes, and approving the ordinance of first reading of ordinance number 2023-016, an ordinance by title only, an ordinance repealing and replacing the Deschutes County Comprehensive Plans Tumalo Community Plan. Ordinance 2023-016. So we'll be back in what, 2 weeks?
It's on May 8th. Yes, very, very good, Commissioner. And yeah,
Okay.
thank you for your time. If there's no further questions, appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being the keeper of this process.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Good job. Okay, now we're at item number 9. Looks like Holly? Yes. Oh, it's taken decades, hasn't it? See, I have all these relatives and they're all Haley. So I look at your name and I go like, okay.
Thank you, Chair Dare. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Hallie, Associate Planner with the Planning Division. And I'm here today because the county has received an appeal of a hearings officer land use decision for a conditional use permit for 3 non-farm dwellings on 3 separate properties in the exclusive farm use zone. And so again, the purpose of the meeting today is to ask the board whether or not they would like to hear the appeal. If the board decides to not hear the appeal today, the hearings officer decision will be the final county decision, and parties will then be able to appeal that on to LUBA, Court of Appeals, etc. To give some background on this request, Cindy Grossman is the property owner and the applicant who submitted the conditional use permit and surface mine impact area review, again, to establish 3 dwellings on 3 separate adjacent properties under her common ownership. And these properties are located in generally the Lower Bridge area, accessed off of Northwest Lower Valley Drive, just about a mile southwest of the Faith, Hope, and Charity Vineyards. Each of the lots are about 5 acres in size, and again, all adjacent to one another. And again, the zoning is exclusive farm use, which again, for non-farm dwellings requires the conditional use permit. The properties are also in the surface mine impact area, as well as the wildlife area zone associated with the Metolius deer winter habitat. And so again, as part of the application, the applicant had to demonstrate the conditional use criteria for non-farm dwellings were met, as well as the compliance with the wildlife area siting standards. These applications were reviewed at a hearings officer hearing in February, and then on March 22nd, the hearings officer issued their decision on the applications, where he approved the conditional use permit and surface mine review, but denied an exception to the wildlife area siting standards. And so as part of the applicant's package, they provided 2 options for their dwelling location. One was on the eastern side of the lots in compliance with the 300-foot road siting standards, which is applicable in the wildlife area. And then the applicant provided an alternative option where they essentially asked for an exception to those standards, citing the dwellings on the western side of the properties under the equal or greater habitat protection provision that's available in the code. So again, the hearings officer denied that exception request, but approved kind of the option 1 that the applicant proposed. And so again, fast forward to today, we did receive an appeal in opposition from Central Oregon Land Watch, who also participated throughout the hearings officer proceedings. Their key issue areas on appeal were essentially disagreement over the non-farm dwelling approval criteria, as well as the wildlife area siting standards, and with disagreement with sort of our appeal fee structure. So again, today, the question before the board is whether or not they would like to hear the appeal. And as a reminder, in determining whether to hear the appeal, the board may consider only the record before the hearings officer, the notice of appeal, and the recommendation of staff. And on that note, as described in the packet, staff in coordination with legal counsel does recommend the board not hear the appeal for a few different reasons. One, the application could be supported, the hearings officer decision could be supported as it stands. The hearings officer provided an analysis of many of the same issue areas raised in the appeal in their decision, and it was discussed and reviewed throughout the hearings process. Both parties were well represented by attorneys, and the issue areas raised are primarily related to state statute, and the board is unlikely to receive deference if the application were further appealed. And then lastly, it's likely that no matter the outcome of the county's final decision, the application will likely be appealed on to LUBA. And again, so for all those reasons, we do recommend the board does not hear the appeal. I've included, there's an order to decline review in the packet. And if there's any changes or edits to that order, happy to coordinate that. And with that, I'll stop there and answer any questions the board might have.
So Hallie, what if we do want to hear it? Because there's no option for that in the order, correct?
Yeah, so I would probably have our legal counsel discuss that. We can certainly bring it back and prepare that order to hear if the board would like.
Okay, I mean, usually you have like options like A, B, and C or something. Okay, that was my question.
Hallie, as I was reading the staff report, I was trying to, there was a lot of information about kind of what I was interested in was, what is the cumulative impact of non-farm dwellings potentially in the long run? I mean, these three are three in kind of a sequence of already approved non-farm dwellings and potential future non-farm dwelling proposals. And there was a lot of information that addressed this question, but it was challenging to kind of put that all together to come up with an answer. So if I was to ask, if I could pose you that question, what is the ultimate potential non-farm dwelling build out in this project area, or within these property?
It's a great question, Commissioner Chang, and it is hard to kind of capture that because so much of the non-farm dwelling criteria is specific to a certain property. A lot of properties that come through this really rely on the adverse soil conditions of a lot. And so it's hard to fully be able to capture what this might do in the area. But as you noted, this area there are a few non-farm dwellings in the area, a few farm dwellings. It's really kind of a mix. And so, one of the key questions that was asked was, is the approval of these three dwellings going to tip the scales? And the hearings officer found that it wasn't. They found that it's, really, again, tied to some site-specific conditions. But obviously, as you noted, in the notice of appeal, the appellant did raise that issue as something that they disagreed with the hearings officer on.
Right. I mean, did we, in the record, did anyone address kind of what the potential additional non-farm dwelling numbers might be beyond these three?
Yeah, so let me jump back into the staff report here. Let me find that. So I think, let me get that page here. Sorry, jumping. I think,
Lifeline.
Okay, so we've got page 28. Okay. Sorry, bear with me here. There was a lot in this staff report, so
Yeah.
It's a very thick packet.
So there's a couple different, oh, here we go. I got it. So this is on page 28 of the hearings officer decision. Let's see. So there's kind of a couple pieces. So potential non-farm parcels is also what we have to look at for, could parcels be obviously unirrigated parcels with adverse soil conditions? Could they be partitioned to site a non-farm dwelling? And essentially the analysis of the radius showed that between 14 to 15 new non-farm dwelling parcels could potentially be created from land divisions within the 1 mile study area. Again, it's difficult to know exactly if that will occur because there's other factors considering whether the property is a legal lot of record. Do they have, again, the soil conditions, but that's sort of a general, based on the acreage of parcels in this area, sort of a general number.
Thank you. Another question.
Yes, Will.
Good morning, Commissioners. Your planning manager, Will Groves. I got to dig into the staff report a little bit, and that part is an extensive finding because we're supposed to think about existing parcels that could potentially house a non-farm dwelling, as well as potential land divisions that could result in new parcels that might get to a non-farm dwelling. And the cumulative answer from the staff report that was accepted by the hearings officer is 30 to 31 new non-farm dwellings in the study area under a maximum development potential. Each of those has siting standards, limitations. There may not be enough unsuitable ground. There may be too much farm ground to site those. There may not be road frontage. There may be wildlife concerns or constraints associated with it. So that 30 to 31, I wouldn't count those eggs before they hatch. It's a maximal look at kind of a very casual, like, are these theoretically eligible for dwellings? So that was the conclusion from the staff report.
Well, another question I had, and I think this was fairly thoroughly addressed in the staff report, but I was trying to understand the implications of these properties falling within the Metolius mule deer winter range. And so basically, the winter range overlay doesn't say you can't have these non-farm dwellings. It just specifies that they need to be within a certain distance of the road.
Correct. Yeah.
That's
Essentially it's a road that existed as of 1992. And so the applicant relied on some on the eastern side of the property, farm roads, and took that 300-foot measurement, and essentially that dwelling needs to be within that 300 feet. They provided some aerial evidence and other evidence in the record for that.
Okay, that's helpful for understanding this case, and also just for being realistic about what the impacts of mule deer winter range overlay really are out on the rural landscape. Thank you. Do we? I am. These days we need to be very mindful of water questions. And I understand these are not currently irrigated agriculture acres. But do we have any sense of what the irrigated landscape that might come with development of these non-farm dwellings might look like? Or was that not addressed in the record?
That's not typically addressed in the record. Of course, these would be, exempt, presumably single-family dwellings served by exempt wells that are limited to, if I remember correctly, OWRD limits them to a half acre of landscaping. And on top of that, there's gallon totals.
15,000 gallons per day total. Okay.
But the normal house uses 450 gallons in the winter and 1,500 in the summer for a half an acre.
So I support denying the review with the information provided. We may not have deference on these. There's items to discuss here, but yeah, I would come to the conclusion of denying the review. by
So
the
is
board.
that a motion?
I'll make it if we're ready. So I'll move approval of order number 2024-013, an order denying review of the hearings officer's decisions on file number 24723 -293 CU, 294 CU, 295 CU, 737 SMA, 738 SMA, and 739 SMA.
Well, given that the issues being appealed are issues of state statute that we're not likely to receive deference on, I would second that motion.
Is there any further discussion? No. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes no.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So we're now at item number 10.
Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
Kim Riley, Assistant Legal Counsel. Before you is a request for approval of Administrative Policy GA 23A, which outlines the procedures for removal of encampments on vacant county-owned land. Previously, a policy was approved by the board relating to the removal of unsafe encampments. But this is follow-up that is necessary based on the board's prior action in August when substantial amendments were made to Deschutes County Code 11.04 relating to camping and other sleeping associated activity on public property. The changes to the code outline that once the county administrator would make a determination to close county-owned property to the public, it would follow notification procedures that are outlined in the county's encampment removal policy. When that code was adopted, we had a draft policy, but we never actually finalized that policy, given that when that code would take effect, we knew that there would be some delay in when that code would take effect. Now that that code has taken effect, we are asking the board to approve this policy that outlines how the notification process for the removal of these encampments. It substantially mirrors the one that was done for unsafe encampments, but obviously this policy addresses a broader range when we identify property that we want to close. So it's more specific to those situations. I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Kim, when the initial policy was created, was crafted, the concern that approving the policy or activating the policy before alternative places for people to go could actually expose us to legal risk. People who were defending an unhoused person's right to sleep in a public place, for example, might come forward and say and legally challenge us. Now the primary policy is active. Does moving forward with this second policy increase our legal risk, or is it the same as when we activated the first policy?
So just to clarify, I believe it's more the code that where we outlined that we would need to identify alternative locations.
Mm-hmm.
And so the code is active, but in order to actually be able to utilize that code, we do need to implement a policy that outlines a notification procedure. It's mandated by state statute. And also it's referenced in our code section. So otherwise the code wouldn't be able to utilize it. But obviously by adopting this policy, we anticipate that you would have to identify an alternative location, just as we did with the code. So I think the exposure is the same because we would not utilize it absent an alternative location being identified.
So our legal risk is tied to the code, not necessarily this
Correct.
Implementing policy. Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Do we have a motion?
Move approval of county administrator's signature of county General Administrative Policy number GA 23A.
Is there a second? The chair will second. Any further discussion?
As I say, I do support, putting this on paper. This is what it would look like as we try to proceed and work together in the community to, improve the situation, public safety, offering resources for people in need, and not having, unsanctioned encampments where it's very impactful.
And I will, yes, we did hear from our public yesterday when we were south for a public hearing, so I think it's important. Commissioner DeBonne?
I'll vote yes.
If I could.
Oh,
make
sure.
a comment.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I can make a comment when I vote. It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, Commissioner Chang?
I'm really concerned that we have not made more progress on creating alternative places for people to go. I think we certainly could have in this time frame. And I will vote yes on this motion, because I hope adopting this policy will help us become even more focused and get more serious about really doing what's necessary to establish alternative places for people to go.
Okay. And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're now to item number 11. You, Jen.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. Here today to provide the Cannabis Advisory Panel's budget recommendations for the marijuana cannabis tax revenue forecasted fiscal year 25 amount. The Cannabis Advisory Panel, which I will call CAP going forward for this meeting, met on Monday night. They heard, they received 4 requests from different departments in the county for budgets. And they heard from 3 departments proposals, and then they deliberated and made a recommendation. For this incoming year, the state is forecasting that Deschutes County will receive $185,811 for cannabis tax revenue coming in, and the CAP is recommending that 5,811 go to community justice, 20,000 go to community development, 60,000 to health services, and 100,000 to the sheriff's office.
Oh, Jen, sheriff. I always spell it wrong. It has 2 F's and 1 R.
I caught that when I was sitting in the back.
I know.
I did it for my meeting notes as well, and so
I know it's such a weird. It's a weird that it
I
can
just
catch people.
a control find and replace for my meeting notes when I was sitting back there. So
Anyway, but we knew what you meant.
so with that, I can go into further detail about what the specific departments requested and what they were looking for, or answer any questions. So I'll turn it over to you and provide any details you may be looking for.
We definitely need the education. I had heard that 6 young people in Crook County were psychotic disorder from marijuana use. So I believe in the next maybe week or 2, we do have someone from our health department making a presentation to us about the dangers of marijuana. I don't think a lot of parents understand what can really happen to their kids, and they're clearly having a serious impact in Crook County. So
Yeah, Jess Newworth with the Health Services Department provided an excellent presentation to the CAP on Monday evening. And they are doing an ad campaign, which is what their money will go towards, with really some great success rates in their ad campaign about parents engaging in there. So I'm sure those are some of the information you'll receive at the presentation as well.
good.
One of the things I'm curious about, Jen, is how these allocations differ or kind of are consistent with the prior year? Do you have a sense of whether there's been dramatic changes in levels of allocation to various departments between last year and this year?
It's pretty consistent year on year of what they allocated. Same 4 departments requested funding. 3 of the 4 departments received funding almost identical to last year. Community justice got cut a little bit this year. There was just more funds requested than what was available. The CAP did discuss this, that it kind of seems to be the same 4 departments requesting the same amount of money for the same things year end on year. So that was brought up during the meeting as well, but it seemed pretty consistent, at least from, I should say, historically from last year to this year. I wasn't there for the previous year, so I'm not sure what was requested at that juncture. I have exact dollar figures if you'd like that too. I can provide that. Okay.
That's okay. I just, if there had been a really big changes, then it would be helpful to understand kind of what the CAP's thought process was on recommending a major change.
I would say the only noticeable change was that community justice had increased their ask by a significant amount. And the CAP did decrease the amount that they actually paid to community justice this year. Apart from that, it was very consistent with the other 3 departments.
So this information will be plugged into the annual budget, correct? I mean, there's no decisions today or anything.
That's correct. The budget committee should just ping me actually while I was sitting here to see if the board was going to accept the recommendation. So they are waiting to plug it into.
So then a motion to accept is
yeah.
appropriate for today?
That would be appropriate.
Yes.
Just kind of given that last comment that community justice got significantly less than requested. I mean, did all the departments request more than they were allocated, or?
No. Not by a significant amount. I think the sheriff's office requested $8,000 more, which was part of the cost of living and what they put into their into the request. CDD requested the same. I think Health Services requested the same. I'd have to go back and look at that one. I can pull it up really quick if you'd like to know. Okay.
Thank you.
So I make a motion to accept the Cannabis Advisory Committee budget recommendations as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we've already done item 12. Do we have any other items? We did have other items, I think, on Monday, maybe. Any other items today?
Well, happy birthday to my dad. So 80, 84, 82 today. Sorry, I think he was born in 40. Happy Bone, happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Canyon Keys. She's it's her birthday tomorrow. She's a neighbor. So
I just wanted to ask Commissioner Dare, you said you were going to visit with Senator Merkley on Sunday.
right,
Does that mean you're going to the local leaders meeting?
right.
Okay, then we need to publicly notice that because I'll be there as well.
Okay. I think I did coordinate that with Brenda. So it's on my calendar. Anything else? Do we have executive today?
We do not.
Nick, is there anything you wanted to bring up this morning?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, are we good? Okay, let's adjourn. And we do have a meeting, what, Monday?
We meet all day Monday in the.
Oh, that's right. Oh, budget. Yes, starting at 9 a.m. Is that correct? Okay, all right, 9 a.m. Budget Committee. Thank you very much.